Attention, lovers of comeback stories. If the first paragraph grabs you and you don't want to miss a single detail of this epic ascent, subscribe to our channel right now, give us a like, and leave a comment immediately telling us what you expect from Evelyn. He told her she was nothing without him. As they signed the final papers, he leaned in and whispered, "Have fun on the tube, Evelyn. I hope that settlement covers your rent for at least a month." He chuckled, adjusting the cufflink on his $5,000 suit, and strode out toward his new life. She was left alone on the pavement, defeated. But the car that pulled up to the curb wasn't a taxi, and the man who stepped out to open the door for her was no ordinary chauffeur. In that single, breathtaking second, her ex-husband's world, built on arrogance and lies, came crashing down. The scent of the end, a judgment and a broken vow. The air in the royal courts of justice family division smelled of stale coffee and cheap disinfectant. It was the scent of endings, and for Evelyn Chase, it was a nauseatingly familiar one. She sat on a hard wooden bench, her hands tightly clasped around a worn leather portfolio. She wore her one decent suit, a simple navy ensemble from a department store. It was 3 years old, but clean and pressed. It was the suit she'd bought for the interview she thought she'd take before Gavin Thorne convinced her that his career at Kingsbridge Capital had to be the priority. "One of us has to support the other," he'd said, smiling that winning smile that had once captivated her. "And let's be honest, darling, my bonus potential is a bit higher than your degree in art history." So she had supported him. She had managed their home, entertained his insufferable clients, and edited his reports, shrinking her own world until it fit inside the luxurious penthouse he paid for. The heavy hallway door opened, and he appeared. Gavin Thorne. He was not alone. Clinging to his arm was Bianca Hayes, the 24-year-old solicitor he'd sworn was just a friend. Bianca's blonde hair was immaculate, her white suit aggressively bright in the dismal corridor. She carried a 10,000-pound Hermes Birkin bag, a bag Evelyn recognized. It was the one she had pointed out in a shop window 6 months earlier, just before she found the hotel receipts. Gavin saw Evelyn. His face, which she had once loved, twisted into a smile of pure, naked arrogance. "Evelyn, darling!" he exclaimed, letting his voice ring out. People turned to look. "I almost didn't recognize you. Are you all right? You look tired." Evelyn stood, refusing to be minimized. "Hello, Gavin. Bianca." Bianca gave her a look of pity that was more insulting than a slap. "Evelyn, I'm so glad this is all finally being resolved. It must be such a relief for you." "Mr. Thorne," Gavin's solicitor, a shark named Mr. Davies, interrupted. "Courtroom 3B, we're on the list." Gavin nodded, but his eyes remained locked on Evelyn. He leaned in as if sharing a secret, yet spoke loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "Honestly, Evie, you should have just taken the first offer. This whole court charade, it's just sad." "I just want what is fair, Gavin," Evelyn said, her voice barely a whisper. "Fair?" He laughed. "Fair is what I built. You were just there. Did you really think the judge would give you half for arranging flowers?" He adjusted his silk tie, a bright, unpleasant blue. "Look, I have to run. Big meeting after this. The penthouse goes on sale Monday. Bianca and I are moving into the new place in Mayfair. But don't worry." He patted his chest pocket. "Your little settlement check is ready. Don't spend it all at once. Perhaps a nice studio flat near the Jubilee line." He and Bianca swept past, leaving the scent of expensive cologne and mockery in their wake. Evelyn felt her face burn, but she refused to cry. She had cried enough in the lonely flat she'd been renting for 6 months, the one paid for by selling her grandmother's last few pieces of jewelry. Inside the courtroom, it was worse. Gavin's lawyer painted her as a bitter, lazy wife who contributed nothing. Gavin, on the stand, listed his assets, his promotions, his long hours. He generously offered a one-time payout of £50,000. She has no claim to my bonuses or my portfolio, Gavin stated calmly. Ms. Chase hasn't worked in 5 years. She has no idea what it takes to earn at my level. When the bored-looking judge finally stamped the papers, the gavel was like a sledgehammer blow to Evelyn's chest. It was done. She was divorced. She was free. And by Gavin's metrics, she was worthless. As she walked out, he passed her and didn't even look at her. He just uttered one last thing. Good luck, Evelyn. You'll need it. Evelyn walked out of the courthouse into the bright, damp London sun. She clung to her portfolio, the £50,000 settlement feeling like 50,000 pieces of pity. It wouldn't last 6 months, not after paying her solicitor. She heard them before she saw them. Gavin and Bianca laughing as they walked down the courthouse steps. Dinner at the Wolseley tonight, my love, Gavin said, pulling Bianca close and kissing her. We're celebrating. Oh, look, Bianca said, pointing with her chin. She's still here. Evelyn stood on the pavement, phone in hand, trying to open the Uber app. Her hands were shaking. Gavin approached, his smile gone, replaced by a final look of condescension. What's the matter, Evelyn? Can't get a signal? You know, for a £50,000 payout, you could probably afford a black cab. Or is that too much of a splurge? Evelyn said nothing. She just stared ahead, concentrating on the traffic. God, you're pathetic, he hissed. Look at you. You're a ghost. I did you a favor, Evelyn. I freed you. Now you can go back to whatever it was you did before you met me, working in that dusty, second-rate gallery. Gavin, leave her alone, Bianca said, not out of kindness but impatience. Let's just go. My feet hurt. In a second, my love. Gavin was savoring this. This was his final victory. I just want to send her off. Make sure she gets to her new life safely. Hope you brought a tube pass, Evelyn. He was about to say more when a car rounded the corner. It wasn't just a car. It was a shadow. A piece of silent, impossibly sleek engineering that made Gavin's new BMW 7 Series, parked down the street, look like a child's toy. It was a matte midnight black Bugatti Chiron that seemed to drink the sunlight. It moved with the grace of a predator and stopped directly in front of Evelyn. Gavin and Bianca froze. Holy hell, Gavin breathed, his eyes wide. He knew cars. He knew that vehicle was worth more than his penthouse. Who the hell is that? They stared, assuming it was for a visiting judge or politician. Then the driver's side door opened. The man who emerged was not a chauffeur. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit so perfectly tailored it seemed an extension of his body rather than clothing. His hair was silver at the temples, and his face was sharp, angular, and utterly impassive. He radiated an aura of absolute, terrifying authority. Gavin knew that face. He'd seen it on the cover of Forbes. He'd seen it in the Wall Street Journal. It was Julian Sterling, the ghost of Canary Wharf, the reclusive tech and logistics billionaire, a man rumored to be worth over £50 billion, a man whose firm, Sterling Industries, was a major client of Kingsbridge Capital. Gavin's blood ran cold. His mouth went dry. No, he whispered. It can't be. Julian Sterling did not look at Gavin. He did not look at Bianca. He did not acknowledge their existence. He calmly walked around the front of the Bugatti and stopped directly in front of Evelyn. He reached out and, with a delicacy completely at odds with his formidable presence, opened the passenger door. Evelyn, he said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the street noise like a scalpel. Is this resolved? Evelyn finally looked up, her expression serene. The trembling in her hands had ceased. Yes, Mr. Sterling, it is finalized. Good, he said. He glanced at her simple portfolio. Did you bring the files on the Rotterdam acquisition? They're in my bag, sir, she replied. Excellent. We have a flight to Geneva. The Sotheby's auction is tomorrow, and I want to review the provenance of that missing Picasso once more before we commit." He held the door for her. Evelyn paused, and, for the first time, turned to look at Gavin. She didn't look angry. She didn't look triumphant. She looked indifferent. It was the look one might give a stranger who has bumped into them in a crowd. She gave him a tiny nod. "Goodbye, Gavin." She slid into the low seat of the Bugatti. Julian Sterling shut the door with a soft, expensive thud. He walked back to the driver's side. Only then, just before getting in, did he finally drop his gaze on Gavin. His eyes were steel gray. He looked at Gavin for exactly 1 second. It wasn't a look of rage. It was a look of complete and utter disdain. It was the look a king might give a court jester who has just told a bad joke. Then he got in the car. The engine, which had been nearly silent, roared to life, a deep, vibrating sound of pure power. The car pulled away from the curb and vanished into the traffic, leaving Gavin and Bianca standing in its wake. Bianca was the first to speak, her voice high and shaky. Marco, who was she? How does she know him? Who was that?" Gavin was frozen. His face was chalk white. The smile was gone, replaced by a mask of nauseating, nascent horror. "That," he stammered, his 5,000-pound suit suddenly feeling like a cheap rental. "That was Julian Sterling. Interactive moment and CTA. The unexpected turn has left Gavin speechless. Is this the start of Gavin's decline, or just a stumble? How do you think Evelyn secured the favor of such a powerful man? Share your theories in the comments. And if this moment took your breath away, like and subscribe to not miss the rest of the story. The forging of a diamond. The Sterling Eye. 6 months earlier, Evelyn was sleeping on her sister's sofa, surrounded by boxes of what was left of her life. Gavin had been brutal. The moment she confronted him about Bianca, he hadn't just gotten defensive. He went on the offense. He froze their joint accounts, hired the solicitor, and served her divorce papers before she had even packed a bag. He alleged irreconcilable differences and financial abandonment, declaring her a drain on his assets. She was broken. The woman who had graduated with honors in art history and curation from the Courtauld Institute, who had been the most promising junior curator at the Tate Britain before Gavin moved her for his career, was now applying for barista jobs. One night, trawling obscure, high-level job boards, she found a listing. It was anonymous, posted by a private recruitment firm. Wanted, private collection manager and asset curator. Must have expert knowledge in the 17th century Dutch masters, postmodern sculpture, and high-level forgery identification. Must be willing to travel internationally 80% of the time. Must be able to pass an exhaustive background check and sign a lifelong NDA. Discretion paramount. Salary non-negotiable and substantial. It was a fantasy, a job for someone with decades of experience. Evelyn, on a whim, fueled by desperation and a glass of cheap wine, sent in her old CV along with a scathing yet brilliant analysis she had written on a newly discovered Vermeer that she was certain was fake. She did not expect a reply. She got one. 2 hours later, an email. Be at this address tomorrow, 9 a.m. Bring your passport. The address was a nondescript glass tower in Canary Wharf. The lift required a key card, a silent guard provided. She was led to an office penthouse that was empty, save for one desk, 2 chairs, and a single painting on the wall. Julian Sterling stood in front of it. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't shake her hand. He just pointed at the painting, a chaotic, beautiful piece in the style of Jackson Pollock. I paid £22 million for this, at a private auction last year, he said, his voice as quiet as it was on the courthouse steps. It was authenticated by the artist's estate. Tell me about it. Evelyn looked. She truly looked. She walked closer, examining the canvas, the paint splatters, the signature. For 10 minutes, the only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. "It's beautiful," she finally said. "I didn't ask if it was beautiful," Sterling countered, still with his back to her. "It's a forgery," Evelyn stated. He turned. His eyes narrowed. "Explain." "Pollock's method is about controlled chaos. This is just chaos. The drip patterns are wrong. They are too hesitant in some places, too aggressive in others. But the real proof," she pointed to a small corner, "is the paint. It's titanium white, but it's an acrylic-based titanium, not the oil-based casein he used during this period. This was likely painted in the 1980s, not the 1950s. Sterling stared at her. His face was unreadable. He walked to his desk and pressed a button on his intercom. "Send in Mr. Riley." A moment later, a nervous-looking man in an expensive suit rushed in. "Sir, Mr. Riley, this is Ms. Chase. She has just identified the Pollock as a forgery." Mr. Riley laughed nervously. "Sir, with all due respect, my team at Sotheby's authenticated it. It's impossible." "Ms. Chase," Sterling cut in. "What did you say about the paint?" "It's acrylic-based titanium white," Evelyn said, her voice firm. "His was casein. You can run a simple mass spectrometry on it. I'll stake my reputation on it." "Riley," Sterling said, "have the lab do it. Now, if she's right, you're fired." Mr. Riley paled and rushed out of the room. Sterling turned back to Evelyn. "Are you divorced?" he asked. Evelyn winced. "It's in process." "Your husband is Gavin Thorne of Kingsbridge Capital," Sterling stated. It was not a question. "He's a portfolio manager, over-leveraged in his personal life, and believes he is smarter than he is. He is cheating on you with his solicitor." Evelyn was speechless. How did you know that?" "I don't tolerate fools, Ms. Chase, and I don't hire people I haven't thoroughly vetted. The background check was exhaustive." He tapped his desk. "Your analysis of the fake Vermeer was correct. My team came to the same conclusion last week. It took them 3 months. It took you 1 night." He walked to the window. "I own the largest private art collection in the world. It's a liability. It's an asset. And it is full of snakes like Riley who tell me what I want to hear. I need someone who will tell me the truth, even if it costs me £22 million. He turned. "You start today. The job pays £1 million a year plus expenses. You report only to me. Your first task is to audit my entire collection piece by piece and find every other mistake Mr. Riley made. My car is waiting downstairs to take you to your new flat. Sign the NDA on the desk." That was 4 months ago. 4 months of 18-hour days, flights to Zurich, Tokyo, and Paris. 4 months of rediscovering the razor-sharp intellect she had buried to make Gavin comfortable. She was not his mistress. She was his most valuable, trusted asset manager. The £50,000 settlement was not a lifeline. It was an insult. And Mr. Sterling, who despised being insulted almost as much as he despised being lied to, had insisted on picking her up from the courthouse himself. The hammer of justice. The King Falls. Gavin did not go to the Wolseley. He didn't go back to the office. He went to the Polanco penthouse, his penthouse, and poured himself a glass of Macallan 25. He downed it in one go. "Gavin, you're scaring me," Bianca said, pacing the marble floor. "Who was she with? You said she was broke. You said she was nothing." "He's a client," Gavin mumbled, pouring another. "He's not just a client. He's the client. Sterling Industries has half its liquid assets managed by our London office. He is Julian Sterling." Bianca's eyes widened, but not with fear, with calculation. "So she's his girlfriend? She left you for a billionaire?" "No!" Gavin roared, slamming the glass onto the table. "I left her. She got lucky. She must have, I don't know, met him in a bar. She's a gold digger, that's all it is." But his words sounded hollow, even to him. The Evelyn who got into that car was not the mousy, apologetic woman he had kicked out. She was cold, she was confident, and she was working. Geneva, Sotheby's, the Rotterdam acquisition. He went into his home office and booted up his computer. He pulled up the Kingsbridge Capital internal database. He searched Sterling Julian. The file was virtually empty. Client level, Zeus. Eyes only, managed by the executive Mayfair office. He was locked out. He, a senior VP, was locked out of a client file. He spent the next week in a pure, acid fog of obsession. He couldn't work. He couldn't sleep. Every time he looked at Bianca, he saw her $10,000 Birkin bag and compared it to the casual way Julian Sterling had stepped out of a $3 million car. His whole world was built on the hierarchy of wealth. He was a success because he had the penthouse, the car, the beautiful woman. He had won the divorce. But in 1 second, on the steps of a courthouse, Julian Sterling had turned his entire life into a pathetic joke. He started investigating. He used his contacts to find out about Evelyn's new life. She's not his girlfriend, a contact at a rival firm told him over drinks after Gavin plied him with expensive whiskey. I've heard the rumors. Sterling hired an unknown woman to head his private collection. They call her the Nun. She's brutal. She's been cleaning house, fired half his European staff, exposed 3 high-level forgeries, saved him over $100 million in the last quarter alone. They say she answers to no one but the ghost himself. Gavin felt sick. She saved £100 million, his Evelyn. The woman he had told was too simple to understand his work. The humiliation was a physical pain. It wasn't just that she was successful. It was that her success was in the one field she had given up for him. He hadn't just divorced her. He had drastically underestimated her. And in his world, underestimation was a fatal sin. The final fall, the Queen's indifference. Gavin expected to see triumph. He expected to see a smirk. He expected the same mockery he had shown her. He saw none of it. Evelyn merely looked at him, her expression unreadable, and then a flicker of pity. It was the same look she had given him on the courthouse steps, indifference tinged with mild sadness. She turned, straightened her shoulders, and entered her building. That single look shattered him more than the handcuffs, the realization that he wasn't even worthy of her rage. He was just a problem that had been resolved. A year had passed. Gavin Thorne's name was a ghost, a cautionary tale whispered in London's high-stakes poker rooms and on the trading floors of Canary Wharf. He was the story of the man who had it all and lost it. A fool who believed himself a king. After a humiliating 6-month trial, where his entire life of petty theft, lust, and emotional abuse was laid bare, he had pleaded guilty to 8 counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. He was now serving a 7-year sentence in a low-security federal prison. He had lost the penthouse, his reputation, his car, and his freedom. He was, by every metric he had ever valued, a total failure. Evelyn Chase's name, however, was becoming a legend. Tonight was the coronation. The Victoria and Albert Museum, V&A, was a fortress of light against the cool London night. The unveiling of the Sterling Wing was the most anticipated cultural event of the decade. It wasn't just a new wing. It was a tectonic shift in the art world. Julian Sterling, the ghost of Canary Wharf, had finally decided to show his cards, and he had chosen Evelyn Chase to be his dealer. Evelyn stood just inside the vaulted entrance, a masterpiece of glass and light linking the old building to the hyper-modern new wing. The wing itself was her design, her vision, a 3-story atrium of Italian white marble and polished steel, designed to feel less like a museum and more like a cathedral. And tonight, it was packed. The air buzzed with the sound of quiet generational wealth. Billionaires mingled with national prize-winning artists. Politicians kissed the hands of European royalty. The scent of orchids and expensive champagne floated through the atmosphere. Evelyn herself was almost unrecognizable from the woman on the courthouse steps. She wore a simple midnight blue silk evening gown. It was understated, elegant, and had cost more than Gavin's BMW. Her hair, which she used to pull back in a severe, apologetic bun, was styled in soft, confident waves. She wore no jewelry, save for a pair of sapphire teardrop earrings Sterling had gifted her, a signing bonus, he had called them, after her first month. She was not the mousy, trembling woman he had ridiculed. She was the Sterling Eye, a name coined by a fawning Vanity Fair profile, a title she had initially hated, but now accepted. She was the principal curator and chair of the Sterling Art Foundation, a £10 billion philanthropic endowment. Her job was no longer just acquiring art, but preserving it, studying it, and sharing it. She was, in this world, terrifyingly powerful, and in this moment, she was terrified. This was her debut. For the last 18 months, she had been a ghost, operating in the shadows, just like her boss. She had been in dusty archives in Florence, high-tech vetting labs in Zurich, and tense private auctions in Hong Kong. She had worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week, driven by a fierce, burning need to prove her own worth to the only person who mattered, herself. "It is adequate." The voice, quiet as a tomb, came from her side. Julian Sterling had materialized from the crowd. He was dressed in his uniform, a perfect charcoal suit. He didn't look at the crowd. He was looking at the atrium's centerpiece, the lost Rembrandt they had acquired from the Rotterdam deal, now illuminated to perfection. "Only adequate, Mr. Sterling?" Evelyn asked, a small smile playing on her lips. "The lighting on the left hand is half a degree off," he murmured. "It's hitting the signet ring, but missing the texture of the cuff. Fix that." "I will have it fixed," Evelyn said, making a mental note. "Good." He finally turned his steel-gray eyes to her. "The board is ecstatic. The Times is calling it a triumph of New World philanthropy. You have done well, Ms. Chase." From Julian Sterling, "You have done well," was the equivalent of a marching band and a parade. "Thank you, sir," she said. "Don't thank me. You executed the strategy." He nodded toward the crowd. "Now go. This is your night. Mingle with the vipers. I will be watching." He retreated into an unlit alcove, a ghost at his own party, and simply observed. Evelyn took a deep breath and stepped into the main hall. She was immediately swarmed. Donors, critics, artists, everyone wanted a piece of the Sterling Eye. She handled them with a grace she didn't know she possessed, discussing a 17th century pigment composition with one and endowment strategy with another. She was fluid, confident, and precise. Then she saw her, across the room, standing next to a much older, more corpulent man, with a politician's smile, was Bianca Hayes. She was poured into a garish, bright gold dress, her blonde hair piled high. She was still beautiful, and she still carried a Birkin bag, a new one in bright pink crocodile. She had landed on her feet, just as Evelyn knew she would. Bianca was a survivor, a trophy who knew her own market value. Their eyes met across the room. Evelyn saw a flicker of emotions on Bianca's face. First confusion. Who is that? Then dawning recognition, followed by a wave of pure, unadulterated shock. Bianca's painted smile wavered. She saw Evelyn's dress, her composure, the wing of a museum that was essentially her project. Bianca looked at her own garish dress, at the aging man whose arm she held, and for one beautiful second, she looked vulgar. Evelyn did not smirk. She did not glare. She did not give her the satisfaction of any emotion at all. She simply held her gaze, gave a small, polite, and utterly dismissive nod, and turned back to the museum director she was speaking with. It was a small victory, but it was sweet. She was so focused on this small triumph that she didn't see the real threat until he was right in front of her. "Ms. Chase, a pleasure." His name was Preston Reed. He was the chief curator of the National Gallery, a man of old money, with a patrician accent and a deep disdain for anyone who hadn't inherited their position. He saw the art world as his exclusive club, and she was the new rich upstart with a billionaire's checkbook crashing through the doors. In his eyes, she wasn't a curator. She was a glorified personal shopper. She was Gavin Thorne, but with a Cambridge PhD. "Mr. Reed?" Evelyn said, her voice cool. "I'm so glad you could make it. I hope you're enjoying the exhibition." Reed, flanked by a small, parasitic entourage of critics and reporters, smiled a thin, condescending sneer. "It is certainly an exhibition," he said, letting the word hang. "So much volume. Mr. Sterling has been very busy. One wonders if there was any real strategy behind the acquisitions, or if it was simply a matter of, 'I'll take one of those and one of those.'" The reporters scribbled. This was blood in the water. "The strategy," Evelyn said, her voice perfectly even, "is truth. We acquire pieces that have been lost, forgotten, or misattributed. We use Mr. Sterling's resources to restore them and return them to the public. Such as the Donatello in the South Gallery, the one your own museum declared a 19th century imitation." Reed's face tightened. She had publicly reminded him that she had purchased a piece he rejected and that her team had since authenticated, making it one of the world's most valuable sculptures. "A lucky strike, my dear," Reed scoffed. "A blind mole finds a nut in all that, but luck runs out." He turned and pointed his long, pale finger at the centerpiece, the Rembrandt. "This piece, for example," he said, raising his voice, projecting it to the crowd. "The lost Rembrandt. A bold claim. My colleagues at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam are deeply skeptical. They have held their own version, the Rotterdam Rembrandt, for 50 years. They believe it is the original." He moved closer to her, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, venomous whisper. "They believe Mr. Sterling, and by extension you, simply bought the provenance, paid off a few experts to create a paper trail. A costly and embarrassing mistake. You have built your entire wing around a forgery, Ms. Chase, and tomorrow the Times will run a front-page story on that very skepticism." This was it. The ambush. The crowd went silent. Reporters' pens flew. This wasn't just a challenge. It was an execution. He was accusing her in front of the entire art world of being a fraud. He was trying to do exactly what Gavin had done. Mock her, dismiss her, and paint her as a stupid, unqualified woman who was out of her depth. She looked past Reed's smug face across the vast atrium and saw Julian Sterling in the shadows. He was watching. He made no move to help. This was her test. Evelyn turned her back on Reed and looked at the painting. She looked at it for 10 silent seconds. She let the tension build. The only sound was the distant click of a camera. When she turned back, she was no longer nervous. She was a different person. She was the Sterling eye. "Mr. Reed," she said, her voice clear and cutting. "You are right to be skeptical. I was too." She walked toward the painting, and the crowd parted for her. Reed had no choice but to follow. She stopped right in front of it. "You and your colleagues in Amsterdam are correct," she said. "The Rotterdam piece is brilliant. The brushwork is exquisite. The composition is identical. For 50 years, it has been unquestionably held as the original." Reed smiled. "So you admit it." "But it is a copy," Evelyn interjected, her voice like steel. A masterful, contemporary copy, painted by a student in his studio, and do you know how we know? Reed was silent. Evelyn pointed at the painted cuff on the subject's left wrist. We know because of this. You have seen the painting, Mr. Reed, but you haven't studied it. My team and I spent 4 months on this piece. We ran mass spectrometry, X-ray fluorescence, and infrared reflectography. The Rotterdam piece is painted on a standard oak panel, which is correct for the period. She tapped the wall label next to the painting. This one, however, is painted on imported New World mahogany panel, a wood Rembrandt was known to favor for his most important commissions, but which his students could almost never afford. But that's not the proof. That's just a clue. She looked directly at the New York Times reporter. The proof is in the mistakes. She motioned to a museum assistant, who handed her a tablet. She tapped the screen, and a large monitor on the wall lit up, showing an infrared image of the painting. This, Evelyn said, is the pentimento, the underlying drawing, the artist's original sketch that he painted over. Look at the subject's right hand. In the underlying drawing, he was holding a pair of gloves. In the final painting, the gloves are gone, and his hand rests on his sword hilt. She zoomed in, her voice ringing with absolute, unshakable authority. A forger, Mr. Reed, copies the final product. They copy what they see. The Rotterdam painting. It has no pentimento. It was painted perfectly in one go. It is a brilliant copy of this, our final version. She turned to face the stunned crowd. Only the master changes his mind. The Rotterdam piece is a copy. This is the original. This is the process. This is the truth. Then she delivered the final, devastating blow. She looked at Reed, her expression not triumphant, but almost pitying. The same look she had given Gavin as he was led to the police car. My full analysis, including the spectral data and infrared scans, was sent to the Rijksmuseum 2 days ago. We received their official retraction of their original claim this morning. They will be co-authoring our paper on the discovery. She looked at the Times reporter. I believe their official statement is being sent to your editor, right now. You might want to check your email. Your front-page story is going to need a new headline. Preston Reed's face was chalk white. He had been so confident. He had been so arrogant. He had been academically, forensically, and publicly dismantled. He did not say a word. He simply turned. His entourage melted away from him, and he walked in humiliated silence out of the wing. The silence that followed lasted 3 seconds. Then it broke. The room erupted in sustained, thunderous applause. It was not just polite. It was a roar. Evelyn stood by the Rembrandt, her hand resting lightly on the wall label. She had done it. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't cried. She had used her mind. She had used the knowledge she was told was worthless. She had won. Later, after the applause finally subsided, she walked to the podium to give her official remarks. Her earlier nerves were gone. She owned this room. She owned her life. Art, she said, her voice clear and strong, is not about possession. It's not about an asset on a balance sheet or a trophy for a wall. It is about preservation. It is about a conversation across centuries. It is about finding the truth in the canvas, even when that truth has been painted over. She smiled, a small, genuine smile that lit up her face. For too long, this world has been dominated by those who see art as one more way to demonstrate their power. Tonight, that changes. The Sterling Wing opens not as a monument to wealth, but as a commitment to truth, to the stories that were almost lost. The applause was, if anything, even louder. As the party began to wind down, the young, enthusiastic reporter from the New York Times, the one who had just landed the biggest story of her career, found Evelyn by the window. Ms. Chase, that was incredible. An unbelievable achievement. You have come out of nowhere in the last 18 months. You've completely reshaped the auction world. What is your secret? Evelyn took a sip of champagne, looking out at the lights of London. She thought of the courthouse, the smell of stale coffee, the feeling of Gavin's sneering gaze, the moment she thought her life was over, that she was worthless. There is no secret, Evelyn said, her voice warm. I simply stopped allowing other people to define my value. It turns out my pretty little head had far more inside it than anyone, including myself, realized. The reporter furiously scribbled across the room. Standing alone next to a 17th century Vermeer was Julian Sterling. He was, as always, watching. He watched Evelyn command the room, not with threats or volume, but with quiet, unshakable competence. He crossed her gaze. He didn't smile. A smile was too much. But he gave her a single, slow nod, the highest possible compliment from the ghost of Canary Wharf. It wasn't a nod from boss to employee. It wasn't a nod from a man to a woman he had saved. It was a nod of respect, from one master to another. And that is the story of Evelyn Chase. She learned that the best revenge is not revenge at all. It is building a life so magnificent that your past becomes utterly irrelevant. Gavin tried to shatter her, but only succeeded in removing himself as the biggest obstacle to her success. She didn't need a billionaire to save her. She only needed a chance to save herself. Final CTA and concluding thoughts. What did you think of Evelyn's transformation? Was Gavin's downfall just, or was it a cold, calculated move by Sterling? Let us know your take in the comments below. We read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice and vindication, please show your support by hitting that like button. It truly helps the channel. And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own worth. Most importantly, if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel and hit that bell. We post new stories every week, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Thank you for listening. Hello everyone, and welcome to this corner of stories that will leave you breathless. Before we dive into this tale of old money, silent power, and a spectacular public reckoning, I have a deal for you. Subscribe now and hit that bell so you don't miss any of our epic narratives. Your support is the spark that ignites every one of our stories. Imagine this. The air in the grand ballroom of the Sterling Manor in Boston was so thick you could almost cut it. It reeked of an intoxicating mix of generational wealth and the suffocating sweetness of night-blooming jasmine, a cloying combination of old Boston money and newly minted falseness. From her vantage point near the balconies overlooking the Beacon Hill skyline, Dr. Anya Sterling watched the party's reflection in the immaculate glass. She saw the glittering chandeliers, the guests whispering in tailored suits and silk gowns. But most clearly, she saw her husband, Trent Sterling, enter the room with a woman who was not his wife. The woman, Chloe Vance, clung to his arm like a bejeweled leech, her laughter sharp and triumphant. And in that instant, Anya knew the carefully constructed castle of her life was about to crumble. This was no ordinary party. It was a battlefield, and she had just watched the enemy raise their flag. The legacy and the gilded cage. The Sterling family was not merely rich, they were a dynasty. Their name was etched into the foundations of banks, universities, and the Boston Symphony Orchestra. Their ancestral home, a sprawling stone manor in the heart of the distinguished Beacon Hill neighborhood, was more than a residence. It was a monument to their legacy, with manicured gardens, an oak-paneled library guarding first edition classics, and a ballroom that had hosted senators and governors. The estate was a kingdom. For the last decade, Anya Sterling had been its quiet, discreet queen. She hadn't been born into this world. Her background was one of modest means. Her parents were a university professor and a librarian. She met Trent Sterling in college, a whirlwind romance where she was swept away by his charm and the intoxicating allure of his world. She was intelligent, serene, and possessed a quiet grace that the family patriarch, Senator Harrison Sterling, found refreshing compared to the ambitious socialites his son usually dated. He had given his blessing, and Anya had dutifully assumed her role. She managed the manor with a silent efficiency often mistaken for meekness. She knew the name of every staff member, the favorite flower of every visiting dignitary, and the precise temperature at which Senator Sterling took his evening herbal tea. She was the silent engine that kept the Sterling empire running flawlessly on the domestic front. While Trent handled the public aspects of Sterling Industries, closing deals and giving speeches, Anya ensured the home he returned to was a sanctuary of perfect order. But over the years, the gilded cage had begun to feel more like a prison. Trent's initial affection had cooled into a courteous, condescending indifference. He saw her not as a partner, but as a high-level domestic administrator. He took her loyalty for granted, mistaking her grace for weakness. Their conversations became transactional, revolving around schedules, events, and his father's needs. The shared laughter and late-night whispers of their youth were distant, faded echoes in the manor's cavernous hallways. Her only true ally in the house was Senator Harrison Sterling. The patriarch, now in his late 70s, and battling a degenerative illness that confined him to a wheelchair, was a man of few words but sharp perception. He had built his empire from the ground up and possessed an unsettling ability to see through facades. He saw the way Trent's eyes avoided Anya when she spoke. He saw the weary sadness that sometimes settled in her expression when she thought no one was looking. Senator Sterling and Anya forged a deep, unspoken bond. She spent hours in the library with him, reading his favorite history books aloud, or simply sitting in comfortable silence while he worked on his memoirs. She attended to his needs, not out of obligation, but out of genuine affection and respect. She saw the brilliant, formidable man beneath the frail exterior, and he, in turn, saw the steel backbone beneath her savoir-faire. "You have more of the Sterling spirit than he does," Senator Sterling had once murmured, his voice thin but clear, gesturing vaguely toward Trent's study. "Blood is not everything, Anya. Character is." The words had been a balm to her bruised soul, but they hadn't changed the reality of her marriage. 2 years ago, Chloe Vance entered their lives. She was a marketing executive at a firm Sterling Industries had acquired. Ambitious, beautiful in a sharp, predatory way, and utterly brazen. The affair began as whispers, and then became an open secret. Soon, Trent stopped trying to hide it entirely. He began bringing Chloe to corporate events, then to casual family dinners. Each appearance was a fresh humiliation for Anya. She endured the pitying glances of her friends and the smug, triumphant smiles of Chloe, who seized every opportunity to mark her territory. Chloe would casually mention a trip she and Trent had taken, a private joke they shared, or an intimate detail of his life that a wife should know. But Anya didn't know. Chloe was a constant public reminder of Anya's displacement. Yet, for the sake of Senator Sterling, Anya kept her head high, refusing to give Chloe the satisfaction of a public scene. She absorbed the pain, the disrespect, the slow-motion demolition of her marriage, and carried on. Her resilience was a silent act of defiance, a promise to herself that she would not break. But she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that a breaking point was coming for all of them. The combat. The Charleston Gala. The annual Sterling Foundation Gala in Charleston, South Carolina, was the social event of the season. It was a night of performative charity, where the elite gathered to extend checks, drink fine wine, and reaffirm their place at the top of the societal food chain. But this year, the gala carried a deeper significance. It was a double celebration, the 30th anniversary of the foundation, and more importantly, Senator Harrison Sterling's 80th birthday. Anya had overseen every detail with meticulous care, from the string quartet softly playing in the foyer to the towering floral arrangements of white orchids and hydrangeas, all a testament to sober elegance, a reflection of Senator Sterling's own tastes. She wore a classic navy gown by a timeless designer, her only jewels the sapphire earrings that had been a gift from the senator years ago. She moved among the arriving guests with effortless grace, a warm smile for everyone, her voice a low, reassuring murmur in the rising tide of chatter. She was the consummate hostess, the very picture of sterling dignity. The party was in full swing when Trent finally made his entrance. He was not alone. Hooked on his arm was Chloe Vance, wrapped in a garish, blood-red dress that plunged dangerously low in the front and audaciously high in the back. It was a dress designed to be noticed, to scream for attention in a room that whispered. Her diamonds were bigger, her makeup heavier, her laugh louder than anyone else's. She was a splash of cheap paint on the canvas of an old master. A hush spread through the ballroom as they entered. Conversations cut short. Eyes darted from Anya to Trent and Chloe, then quickly darted away. It was one thing to take a mistress to a restaurant or a nightclub. It was quite another to bring her to the patriarch's birthday celebration, to the very heart of the family home. It was a declaration of war. Trent, to his credit, looked momentarily uncomfortable. He had the decency to avoid his wife's gaze, his eyes fixed on some point over her shoulder. But Chloe's smile was one of pure, venomous triumph. She scanned the room like the newly crowned queen, her eyes finally settling on Anya. She tightened her grip on Trent's arm, a possessive gesture for all to see. Anya felt 100 pairs of eyes on her, waiting for her to crumble. to yell, to make a scene. She felt the blood drain from her face, but her training, her years of practiced composure, kicked in. She straightened her back, raised her chin, and held her ground. She would not allow this woman to destroy a night dedicated to Senator Sterling. She saw her brother-in-law Robert and his wife Claire shoot her a look of horrified compassion. Claire began to move toward her, but Anya gave a slight, almost imperceptible negative shake of her head. Not now. Don't make it worse. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of her own making. She watched as Trent guided Chloe toward the central bar, bypassing his father, who was seated in a large armchair near the fireplace, surveying the room with clouded yet discerning eyes. Senator Sterling's expression was unreadable, but Anya knew him well enough to see the flash of deep disappointment, the tension in his jaw. He had seen the entrance, and he had seen his son's cowardice. The night wore on, every minute an agonizing exercise in self-control for Anya. She continued her duties, speaking to donors, directing staff, and ensuring Senator Sterling was comfortable. All the while, she was painfully aware of Chloe's presence. The woman was a gravitational force of disruption, pulling Trent into her orbit and leaving a trail of uncomfortable silence wherever she went. She moved from group to group, introducing herself with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, her voice ringing across the room as she regaled people with stories that invariably featured her jewelry. Anya felt herself dissociate, watching the scene as if it were a play. There was the dutiful wife, the cheating husband, the vulgar mistress, the observant patriarch. The script felt old, tired, and profoundly humiliating. She had played her part with quiet dignity for 2 long years. But tonight, the stage lights felt intolerably hot, the gaze of the audience unbearably heavy. Something had to give. The foundations of her carefully managed world were cracking, and she could hear the rumble of its impending collapse. The moment of ignition arrived, as it often does, from a trivial incident. Anya was standing by Senator Sterling's chair, quietly asking if he needed anything, when one of the younger waiters, a nervous boy named Leo, accidentally bumped into a guest while carrying a tray of champagne flutes. One of the glasses toppled, splashing a few drops of champagne onto the sleeve of Chloe's crimson dress. "Oh, I'm so sorry, ma'am," stammered Leo, his face flushed with mortification as he fumbled for a napkin. Chloe recoiled as if struck. "Watch where you're going, you clumsy oaf," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut through the ambient music and conversation. Several nearby guests turned to look. Anya stepped forward instinctively, her hostess instincts kicking in. "It's all right, Leo," she said softly, placing a reassuring hand on the young man's arm before turning to Chloe. "It was just a small accident. I'm sure it will dry without a stain." Her tone was polite, neutral, intended to placate. But Chloe wasn't interested in placation. She had been looking for a stage, a moment to assert her dominance over Anya. And this was it. She looked Anya up and down with a sneer of contempt, taking in the simple, elegant gown and the quiet authority with which she had spoken. "You'd know all about cleaning up messes, wouldn't you?" Chloe said, her voice dripping with condescension. She turned to Trent, who had just approached to see the commotion. She hooked her arm through his, gluing herself to him. "Seriously, Trent, why do you even keep her around? Paid staff is more useful." She paused, and her voice rose to a pitch that rang out in the silence. "Tell your little maidservant to fetch me another glass of champagne, and this time make sure she doesn't spill it." The word hung in the air, ugly and obscene. Maidservant. The entire ballroom seemed to go mute at once. The string quartet faltered. A violin squeaked in the sudden silence before ceasing altogether. Every head turned, every eye fixed on the tableau by the fireplace. The humiliated wife, the triumphant mistress, the weak husband, and the silent patriarch. Anya felt the word like a physical blow. It was the culmination of every silent slight, every stolen weekend, every pitying glance she had endured for 2 years. All her pain, her rage, her suffocating sense of injustice coalesced into a single, blinding point of white-hot fury. For a split second, she saw herself lunging forward. She felt the imagined satisfaction of wiping the smug smile off Chloe's face, but she didn't. Instead, a strange and terrible calm descended upon her. Her breathing evened out. Her hands, which had clenched into fists at her sides, slowly relaxed. She met Chloe's cruel, bright eyes with a gaze as cold and clear as ice. She didn't need to scream. Her silence was a weapon in itself. Trent looked utterly lost. He looked from Chloe's hard, expectant face to Anya's chillingly serene one. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, like a fish gasping for air. He did nothing. He said nothing. His inaction was a confession, a verdict, a final, unforgivable betrayal. He wasn't her husband. He was simply the man she was married to. Chloe's smile widened. She thought she had won. She had publicly denigrated her rival, sealing her with the ultimate insult in this world of class and status. And Trent had not defended her. In her mind, the battle was over, but she had miscalculated fatally. She had played her scene for the wrong audience. She thought the most powerful person in the room was Trent, the apparent heir. She had forgotten the king. From his armchair, Senator Harrison Sterling began to move. A collective gasp swept the room as the senator, with a strength that seemed to defy his frail condition, pushed himself up from his chair. He waved off the worried butler who rushed to his side, his eyes burning with a cold fire fixed on the scene before him. All the power, all the authority in the room that had momentarily shifted to Chloe now snapped back and focused on him. He ignored Anya and his son. His gaze fell directly and with crushing weight upon Chloe Vance. "Miss Vance," he began. His voice was not loud, but it echoed into every corner of the dead, silent room with the force of a judge delivering a sentence. "For 2 years, I have tolerated your presence on the fringes of my family. I have watched you operate. I believed my son's infatuation was a temporary lapse in otherwise sound judgment. It appears I was wrong on every count." Chloe's smug expression faltered, replaced by a flash of uncertainty. "Senator Sterling, He raised a single trembling hand, and she fell silent. "You walk into my home, a home built upon 3 generations of integrity and hard work," he continued, his voice laced with contempt. "You wear a dress paid for with my family's money, drink my family's champagne, and stand on my family's floors. And from this position of profound privilege, a privilege you have done nothing to earn, you dare to insult the single person in this room who has demonstrated more character, more grace, and more dignity than you could possibly comprehend." He took one more step closer now, his eyes sweeping her, from her expensive shoes to her perfectly coiffed hair. "You mistake wealth for class. You mistake arrogance for strength. You see this house, this family, as a prize to be won, a corporation to be taken. You are a parasite, Miss Vance, and you have just revealed the depth of your own vulgarity to all." Chloe's face, once a mask of triumph, had paled to a sickly white. She looked to Trent for support, but he remained frozen, his face a mask of horror as he watched his father systematically dismantle his mistress. Senator Sterling then turned his piercing gaze upon his son. The disappointment in his eyes was a tangible thing, a force that made Trent physically recoil. "And you," Senator Sterling said, his voice now filled with a deep, sorrowful anger. "My son, I have watched you become a stranger. You have a wife of impeccable character, a woman who has supported you, cared for you, and tended to your father in his old age with a tenderness you have never shown. A woman who has endured your public humiliations with a stoicism that should have shamed you into being a better man. He gestured with his cane toward Anya, who stood still as a statue, tears silently tracing paths down her cheeks. Look at her, Trent. Look at the woman you discarded for this. The disgust in his voice as he glanced at Chloe was absolute. You have not only broken your vows to her, Senator Sterling declared, his voice rising in strength. You have broken my trust. You have dishonored our name. You believe because you bear the Sterling name you are entitled to the Sterling fortune, this house, this legacy. You have never understood. The name is not a privilege. It is a responsibility you have failed spectacularly to uphold. The public reprimand was brutal, surgical, and complete. Trent's face was livid. He was no longer the powerful heir of Sterling Industries. He was a boy being scolded by his father in front of all his peers. The power dynamic of his entire life had just been shattered, irrevocably. Senator Sterling took a deep, shaky breath, leaning heavily on his cane. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were clear and determined. He had delivered his judgment. Now it was time for the sentence. "Mr. Thorne," he called, his voice ringing with authority, "if you would be so kind." A burly, silver-haired man in a sober suit, the family's longtime attorney, stepped forward from the edge of the crowd, carrying a leather briefcase. The final act was about to begin. The king's verdict. The Sterling Manor deed. Mr. George Thorne, the Sterling family attorney for over 40 years, navigated the sea of stunned guests who parted for him. His face was a professional mask of neutrality, but his eyes held a glimmer of what could only be described as grim satisfaction. He approached Senator Sterling and handed him the mahogany leather briefcase. The senator took it with a firm hand, not opening it immediately. Instead, he surveyed the room, his gaze sweeping over the shocked faces of his friends, business partners, and relatives. He was not just a father reprimanding his son. He was a king holding court, ensuring his decree was witnessed by all. "This house," he began, his voice ringing with a quiet power that commanded absolute attention, "is more than bricks and mortar. It is the heart of our family. My grandfather laid the first stone with his own hands. My father filled these rooms with art and music. I filled them with my own children, hoping they would understand what this place represents: honor and vixie. It is a testament that what we build must outlast us." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. His eyes met Trent's again, and they were no longer filled with anger, but a deep, sharp finality. "A legacy is not passed down by blood alone," Senator Sterling said, his voice clear and unyielding. "It must be earned. It must be respected. It must be nurtured. You, Trent, have treated this house as a hotel and its mistress as a concierge. You do not comprehend its value, and therefore you are no longer worthy of its stewardship." He then turned to Anya. The harshness in his expression softened, replaced by a look of profound paternal affection and deep respect. He beckoned her forward with a gentle nod. Anya moved as if in a dream, stepping forward until she stood directly in front of him. She looked at her hands, unable to meet his gaze, overwhelmed by the sudden, fierce defense of her honor. "Anya," Senator Sterling said, his voice now gentle, "look at me." Slowly she raised her head. His eyes were kind, and in their depths, she saw a validation she had starved for years. "For 10 years, he said, speaking to her, but ensuring everyone could hear. "You have been the true keeper of this family's soul. You have tended to this house not as an administrator, but as a guardian. You have cared for an old man with patience and love. You have endured betrayal with a strength I can only admire. You have shown loyalty, grace, and resilience in the face of profound disrespect. You, my dear, understand what it means to be a sterling far better than my own son ever has. He opened the leather briefcase. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark blue satin, was a thick document tied with a ribbon. He lifted it carefully. "The laws of man say what is mine I can pass to my son," Senator Sterling declared. "But the laws of decency and justice demand what is earned be given to the worthy." He held the document out to her. "This," his voice rang out with triumph, "is the deed to the Sterling Manor. Every square foot of this land, every stone of this mansion, every piece of furniture and art within its walls, I have spent the last 6 months working with Mr. Thorne to transfer the sole and unassailable ownership. It is all legally and irrevocably in your name with immediate effect." He placed the deed into Anya's trembling hands. "This house," Senator Harrison Sterling proclaimed, his voice booming through the astonished silence, "belongs to its true mistress." Anya looked down at the document. Her name, Anya Morgan Sterling, was written in bold, clear script. It was real. The weight of the paper in her hands was the weight of freedom, of justice, of a future she had never dared to imagine. The gilded cage was hers, and now she held the key. For a long moment, the only sound was the contained breath of over 100 people. Then the silence was broken. "No!" shrieked Chloe. Her voice, a raw and ugly sound. "That's impossible. It's his birthright. Trent, do something!" Trent was white as a sheet, his mouth agape. He looked from the deed in Anya's hands to his father's resolute face, his mind struggling to process the catastrophic shift that had just occurred. The manor, the centerpiece of his inheritance, the symbol of his identity, was gone, given to the wife he had ignored. "Father, you can't," he stammered, his voice weak and pleading. "This is our home." "It was your home," Senator Sterling corrected him coldly. "It is now Anya's home. You are a guest here, as is your companion." Anya finally looked up from the deed. The shock was receding, replaced by a wave of empowerment so potent it was dizzying. The tears on her face had dried, and her eyes, when they met Chloe's, were no longer soft and forgiving. They were shards of sapphire, hard and bright. She took a step toward Chloe, who was still clinging to Trent's arm like a drowning woman. "I believe," Anya said, her voice perfectly calm and level, cutting through Chloe's rising hysteria, "that the party is over." She held the deed up slightly for emphasis. "As the owner of this house, I must ask you to leave." She paused for effect. "Now," Chloe stared at her, her face a contorted mask of disbelief and rage. "You can't do this, Trent!" But Trent was a broken man. He was looking at Anya as if seeing her for the first time, not as an accessory to his home, but as a woman who held all the power. Anya's gaze shifted to him. The years of pain, of silent suffering, were in her eyes, but so was unyielding finality. "You too, Trent," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "You have dishonored me in my home for the last time. Pack your things. I will have the staff deliver your bags to the gatehouse. You have 1 hour. "Anya, please," he pleaded, taking a step toward her. "We can talk this through." "There is nothing left to talk about," she replied, turning her back on him. A gesture of dismissal more absolute than any argument. "Head of security, please escort Miss Vance and Mr. Sterling off the premises." 2 burly men in discreet dark suits materialized, moving with silent efficiency. One placed a firm hand on Chloe's arm. She tried to wriggle free. Her voice rose to a high-pitched shriek. "Get your hands off me! Trent, don't let them do this!" But Trent did not move. He simply stared at the life he had just lost. The security guard firmly guided the spluttering, furious Chloe toward the main entrance. The other guard stood patiently beside Trent. Defeated, Trent turned and began the long, humiliating walk out of his own home, followed by the guard. Guests parted to let them through, their faces a mixture of shock, pity, and a certain grim satisfaction. The drama was over, and a new order had been established. When the massive oak doors closed behind them, a scattering of applause broke out. Started by Trent's formidable aunt, who had always despised Chloe, soon the entire room was clapping. They were not just applauding the drama, they were applauding Anya. They recognized the silent strength she had shown for years, and the poetic justice they had just witnessed. Anya stood tall, the deed held firmly in her hand. She gave a small, grateful nod to Senator Sterling, who looked exhausted, but deeply contented. He had secured his legacy by placing it in the most capable hands. He hadn't lost a son. He had crowned a queen. Anya addressed her guests, a slow, genuine smile finally reaching her lips. "If you'll excuse me," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I have some domestic matters to attend to." Conclusion and call to action, CTAs. At its core, this is not just a story about a cheating husband or a scorned wife. It is a story about the true nature of value. Chloe and Trent saw value in money, status, and fleeting passion. But Senator Sterling and Anya understood that real value resides in character, loyalty, and quiet dignity. The Sterling Manor was not just a prize, it was a symbol, and it was finally entrusted to the person who appreciated what it represented. Anya's victory was not just gaining the house, it was the powerful affirmation that her silent strength was worth more than all of Trent's inherited privilege and Chloe's loud ambition. She proved that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is not the one who shouts the loudest, but the one who has patiently earned the right to speak the last word. Your opinion matters. Do you think Senator Sterling acted correctly in choosing character over his own lineage? What would you have done in Anya's place when you heard the word maidservant in the ballroom? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If this story resonated and made you feel that poetic justice exists, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs a reminder that silent strength always prevails. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story of valor and triumph. Until next time, the second battle, the resurgence of resentment. Part 5. The second battle, the Sterling legacy under siege, the new reign and the old enemy. The days following the gala were a whirlwind of decisive action. The story of what happened at Senator Sterling's 80th birthday spread through their social circles like wildfire, becoming an instant legend. The narrative was clear. The quiet, dignified wife had finally vanquished the vulgar mistress and the worthless husband, backed by the patriarch's unyielding judgment. Dr. Anya Sterling was no longer viewed with pity, but with newfound awe and respect. Her first priority was Senator Sterling. She moved his suite of rooms to the sunniest wing of the manor, overlooking the rose gardens he loved. She hired the best private nursing care to complement her own, ensuring he was never lacking comfort or company. His health seemed to rally with the resolution of his family crisis. A great weight had been lifted, and he spent his days quietly dictating his memoirs to a stenographer, with Anya by his side. Her second act was to file for divorce. Trent, humiliated and desperate, tried to contest it, tried to see her, sending endless texts and leaving tearful voicemails. He begged for a second chance, promising he would end things with Chloe, but he had made one terrible mistake, too many. Anya instructed her attorney, a shark recommended by Mr. Thorne, to ignore it all. The trust was broken beyond repair. The settlement was swift and brutal. Trent was left with the trust fund his grandfather had established for him, enough to live comfortably, but not opulently. He was barred from Sterling Industries, and the senator signed over his controlling shares to a professional board, with a significant portion held in trust for future charitable works in Anya's name. Trent had lost his home, his inheritance, his wife, and his father's respect in one single night. Chloe Vance vanished. Once it became clear that Trent was no longer the golden goose, her calls and texts ceased. She was eliminated from the Sterling Industries corporate roster and disappeared from the Charleston social scene as quickly as she had arrived. A mere footnote in the Sterling family saga. Meanwhile, Anya was undergoing a profound transformation. With the weight of her unhappy marriage lifted, she blossomed. She began taking a more active role in the Sterling Foundation, shifting its focus toward causes she was passionate about: education for underprivileged women and arts programs for children. She proved to have a keen business sense, much like Senator Sterling, and the foundation's endowment grew under her leadership. She did not wander the vast manor, alone and lost. Instead, she filled it with life. She hosted fundraisers, chamber music concerts, and tertulias for artists and thinkers. She invited her own family, the professor and the librarian, to stay for long stretches, their quiet, intellectual warmth filling the halls that had once echoed with tension. The house, once a symbol of her confinement, was now the seat of her power and her platform for good. It was no longer a gilded cage, but a vibrant, thriving kingdom. Months later, on a warm spring afternoon, Anya stood on the main balcony, the same one from which she had often watched Trent leave for his trysts. She held a glass of wine, looking out over the sprawling gardens that sloped down to the shimmering waters of the Ashley River. The air was filled with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the distant sound of an orchestra tuning up for a charity event she was hosting. She was no longer Anya, the quiet wife of Trent Sterling. She was Dr. Anya Sterling, matriarch of the Sterling Manor, a philanthropist, a leader. She hadn't inherited her position. She had earned it through silent strength and unyielding character. They had called her a maidservant in her own house. In response, fate and a wise old man had handed her the entire kingdom. And as she looked over her domain, she smiled. Finally, truly, she was home. The resurgence of resentment, a year passed. The seasons changed, painting the grounds of the Sterling estate with the vibrant greens of summer, the fiery hues of autumn, and the austere, elegant white of winter. Under Anya's stewardship, the manor was more alive than ever. It was no longer a silent museum of inherited wealth, but a center of purpose and culture. Senator Sterling, though physically weaker, remained mentally lucid. His days were spent in the sun-drenched library, Anya often reading to him, their bond the stable, unbreakable core of the new home. He watched her command her new life with a profound paternal pride. He had made the right choice. He had secured his legacy by betting on character over lineage, and his gamble had paid off. The ghosts of Trent and Chloe seemed to have faded. After the divorce was finalized, Trent was reported to have moved down to the coast, licking his wounds and living a quieter life on his now significantly reduced trust fund. Chloe had disappeared from the social pages entirely. For the first time in a decade, Anya felt a sense of peace, a belief that the past was finally behind her. But the past is never entirely gone. It is simply waiting for an opportunity to reassert itself. The opportunity arrived on a Tuesday morning in October, delivered by a courier. It was a thick, formal envelope bearing the letterhead of a prestigious Atlanta law firm she didn't recognize. Inside, nestled among pages of dense legal technicalities, was a petition filed in the Superior Court of South Carolina. The petitioner was Trent Sterling. The defendant was Anya Sterling. And the claim was that the transfer of the Sterling Manor property was null and void. Trent was suing her. Not only was he demanding a share of the asset, but he was demanding the whole thing. The grounds were as insidious as they were cruel. He alleged that at the time of the signing, his father, Senator Harrison Sterling, was suffering from diminished mental capacity and was a victim of undue influence by his then daughter-in-law. The petition painted a vile picture. It portrayed Anya not as a devoted caregiver, but as a cunning, manipulative gold digger who had taken advantage of an ill, vulnerable old man and systematically isolated him from his own son, poisoning his mind against his rightful heir to seize the family's greatest treasure for herself. Anya read the words, and the quiet, orderly world she had built began to shake. The fury that rose in her was cold and sharp. This was not the desperate pleading of the broken man who had been escorted out of her house. This was a calculated, venomous assault designed to destroy not only her ownership of the house, but her reputation, her character, and the very foundations of her new life. He was trying to rewrite history, casting himself as the victim and her as the villain. Her first call was to Mr. Thorne. The old attorney's voice was grim. "I feared this might happen, Anya. A cornered animal is dangerous. Trent has nothing to lose and a world to gain. His lawyers are sharks. This will be ugly." The ugliness began almost immediately. News of the lawsuit leaked to the press, and suddenly, the narrative that had once favored her began to splinter. Tabloid articles appeared with speculative headlines. Sterling family war, caretaker wife, conned ailing patriarch. Old photos of her and Trent, in happier times, were juxtaposed with photos of her now, looking serene and powerful at foundation events. The insinuation was clear. Worse was the reaction within the family. Trent's brother, Robert, and his wife, Claire, who had applauded her victory at the gala, now arrived at the manor with faces lined with worry. "Anya, we know this is absurd," Robert began, shifting uncomfortably in the formal drawing room. "We were there. We saw what happened. But a public court battle, the things Trent is alleging, it will drag the family name through the mud." "He is dragging my name through the mud," Anya corrected him, her voice steel. "Of course, and it's despicable," Claire quickly added, her tone placating. "But his lawyers will subpoena Senator Sterling's medical records, force him to testify, to be evaluated by their doctors. Think of the stress on him in his condition. There has to be another way. A settlement, perhaps. Give Trent a fraction of the value, enough to make him go away." Anya stared at them, a wave of profound disappointment washing over her. She had thought they were her allies, but their loyalty was to the family's pristine public image, not to her, or even the truth. They saw her not as the injured party, but as an obstacle to a quiet, clean resolution. They wanted her to pay the man who had mistreated and humiliated her for years simply to avoid a scandal. "No," Anya said, the word final and absolute. "There will be no settlement. I will not pay my abuser a single dollar for the privilege of being defamed by him. Your father knew exactly what he was doing, and his wishes were perfectly clear. I will not allow Trent to profane his father's legacy and my honor just to avoid some bad press." Robert and Claire exchanged a frustrated look. "Anya, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable," she interrupted, standing to signal the end of the conversation. "I am defending the truth. Trent started this war. I intend to finish it." After they left, the vast house felt silent and imposing once more. The battle she thought she had won a year ago turned out to be only the opening salvo. The real war was about to begin, and this time, she was fighting not just for a house, but for her very identity. She walked to the library where Senator Sterling dozed in his wheelchair, a book open on his lap. She watched the gentle rise and fall of his chest and felt a surge of protective resolve. Trent wanted a fight. He had forgotten who he was dealing with. He remembered the quiet, submissive wife. He was about to be reintroduced to the woman who now owned his world. Black pawn. The ultimate proof and the checkmate. The legal battle began in earnest, a grueling process of depositions and discovery motions. Trent's lawyers were relentless. They subpoenaed years of financial records, household staff rosters, and private emails, searching for any scrap of evidence they could twist to fit their narrative. The centerpiece of their strategy was the deposition of Anya herself. They sat across from one another in a sterile, wood-paneled conference room in Atlanta. Trent was there, looking thinner, harder, his eyes filled with a resentful fire. He avoided looking directly at her, whispering to his lead attorney, a predatory-looking man named Mark Torres. For 6 hours, Torres interrogated Anya. He was condescending, invasive, and deeply personal. He brought up her modest background, insinuating she had married Trent for money. He questioned every large purchase she had made, every trip she had taken. He twisted her stewardship of the home into a campaign to control every aspect of Senator Sterling's life. "Isn't it true, Dr. Sterling," Torres sneered at one point, "that you systematically fired staff loyal to Mr. Trent Sterling and replaced them with people loyal only to you?" "I replaced staff who were incompetent or disrespectful," Anya calmly countered, her hands folded on the table. "My loyalty was to the proper functioning of the home and the welfare of my father-in-law, who was the owner of the house." "Your father-in-law, whom you admit was gravely ill," Torres jabbed. "So ill, in fact, that he was easy to confuse, easy to manipulate. My father-in-law was physically frail, but his mind was and is as sharp as a razor," she said, her voice like ice. "A fact you will soon discover." Throughout the ordeal, Anya remained unyielding. The woman who once flinched at a harsh word now met every attack with poise and precision. She answered every question with the simple, unvarnished truth. Her composure clearly unnerved Trent and frustrated his attorney. They had expected her to crumble, to become emotional and contradictory. They had utterly underestimated her. Following the deposition, Anya met with Mr. Thorne. "They have nothing, Anya," the attorney assured her. "It's all insinuation. But their entire case rests on convincing a judge that Senator Sterling's mind was failing. They will push for a court-ordered competency hearing. It will be a circus." "They won't get the chance," Anya said, a look of quiet determination in her eyes. "Senator Sterling and I prepared for this. Trent thinks his father is his pawn. He forgot he was always the best player in the game." A week later, Anya instructed Thorne to make an offer to opposing counsel. It wasn't a settlement. It was an invitation. She invited Trent, Robert, and their respective attorneys to a private meeting at the Sterling Manor. The purpose, she stated, was to present new evidence that would void their lawsuit. Curiosity and arrogance led them to accept. They arrived the following afternoon, convening in the great library, the very heart of Senator Sterling's domain. Senator Sterling himself was not present. Anya had insisted he not be subjected to the stress. Trent walked into the room with a swagger, assuming the invitation was a sign of weakness, a prelude to a settlement offer. Robert and Claire looked simply anxious, hoping to mediate an end to the family's public humiliation. "Thank you all for coming," Anya began, standing before the large mahogany desk. "You have put my character, and more gravely, Senator Sterling's cognitive state, on trial. You have accused me of manipulating a frail old man. Before we proceed with this farce in court, I thought it only fair that you hear from the victim himself." Mark Torres sneered. If you think putting an ailing man on the stand to give a coached statement will help your case, he won't be taking the stand, Anya said, pointing to a large television screen that had been discreetly installed on the wall. He already has. She pressed a button on a remote. The screen sprang to life. It showed Senator Harrison Sterling sitting in that very library in his favorite armchair. He looked frail, yes, but his eyes were clear, intelligent, and piercing. He was looking directly into the camera. The date and timestamp in the corner of the screen read 6:30 p.m. on the night of the gala, just 2 hours after he had signed the final deed transfer documents with Mr. Thorne, who was seated just out of frame. "I am Harrison Sterling," he began, his voice raspy but firm. "I am recording this statement of my own free will, in full use of my faculties, to clarify the legal and moral reasoning behind my decision to transfer the title of my home to my daughter-in-law, Anya Morgan Sterling." Trent's face went white. Robert leaned forward, his expression frozen in shock. "My son, Trent," Senator Sterling continued, his gaze unyielding, "believes this house is his birthright. A birthright is a concept for kings and fools. In the real world, things of value must be earned or at least respected. Trent has done neither." Senator Sterling then systematically and with devastating precision recounted Trent's years of neglect, his cruelty toward Anya, and his profound lack of character. "Bringing that woman, Chloe Vance, into my home on the night of my birthday was not just an insult to his wife. It was a final demonstration of his pathetic weakness. A man who cannot control his own basic impulses cannot be trusted to steward a legacy." The camera appeared to zoom slightly on Senator Sterling's face. "Let me be perfectly clear for any court or any person who might question my mental state. This was not an act of anger. It was an act of clarity. I have watched Anya for 10 years. I have seen her integrity, her strength, her compassion. She has honored the responsibilities Trent has shirked. She has shown more sterling character than he ever has. The house is not a reward. It is a recognition of who she is." Senator Sterling's gaze then seemed to soften, but his words sharpened. "And to my other son, Robert," he said, and Robert visibly winced. "You may wonder why I did not pass the property to you. It is because your defining characteristic has always been conflict avoidance. You are a good man, but you are not strong. You would have appeased Trent. You would have sold the estate to keep the peace. You would not have fought for it. Anya will." The video ended. Senator Harrison Sterling from the past had delivered the final, unassailable judgment. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by a small, strangled sound from Trent. He stared at the blank screen, his face ashen. He had been so sure of his father's weakness, so convinced of his own victimization. In 5 minutes, his father had dismantled his entire case, his entire sense of self, with cold, hard truth. Anya remained silent, allowing the weight of Senator Sterling's words to fill the room. There was no triumph on her face, only a mournful finality. Mark Torres was the first to speak, clearing his throat. "This is highly unorthodox, but compelling." He knew, as did everyone in the room, that the video was a silver bullet. No judge would rule against such clear and compelling evidence of Senator Sterling's intent and lucidity. The lawsuit was dead. The next morning, Trent's lawyers formally withdrew the petition. It was over. Trent left the manor that day without another word. Robert and Claire approached Anya before departing, their faces humbled. "He was right, Anya," Robert said, his voice heavy with regret. "About me, about everything. Forgive us for doubting you." Anya simply nodded. The war was finally, truly over. She had fought for her home, her honor, and the legacy of Senator Sterling. And she had won. Standing alone in this quiet library, she looked out the window at the sprawling gardens. The echoes of the past had faded, replaced by the promise of a future she would build on her own terms. A future built not on birthright, but on character. Conclusion and final call to action. At its core, this is not just a story about a cheating husband or a scorned wife. It is a story about the true nature of value. Chloe and Trent saw value in money, status, and fleeting passion. But Senator Sterling and Dr. Anya Sterling understood that real value resides in character, loyalty, and quiet dignity. The Sterling Manor was not just a prize, it was a symbol, and it was finally entrusted to the person who appreciated what it represented. Anya's victory was the powerful affirmation that her silent strength was worth more than all of Trent's inherited privilege and all of Chloe's loud ambition. She proved that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is not the one who shouts the loudest, but the one who has patiently earned the right to speak the last word. Your opinion matters. Do you think Senator Sterling was too harsh on Robert, the brother who was conflict avoidant? Was the $500,000 video the ultimate strategic move? Let us know your opinions in the comments. If this story resonated and made you feel that poetic justice exists, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs a reminder that silent strength always prevails. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story of valor and triumph. Until next time.